I need to say this up front. It wasn't what you're thinking. I know what that title sounds like. I know exactly what your brain did when you read it, and I need you to set that aside, because what actually happened in that room at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon was worse. Not worse like dangerous. Worse like the kind of quiet that rewires everything you thought you understood about someone and then doesn't let you put any of it back. Margaret Chen closed the bedroom door behind me, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "She'll be out for hours. Don't rush." Then she walked downstairs and left me standing alone in her daughter's childhood bedroom, surrounded by every drawing Lily Chen had ever made of me, and never, in 7 years of friendship, mentioned. My name is Owen Hale. I'm 35. I teach high school woodworking. Yes, it still exists. And no, I don't have all 10 fingers, which is the first thing people ask. I have 9.5. The missing portion is from a table saw incident when I was 22 that my students find far more interesting than anything in the curriculum. I am not a complicated person. I like things that make sense, joints that fit, measurements that hold, wood that tells you what it wants to be if you're patient enough to listen. I apply this same principle to people with mixed results. Lily Chen had been my best friend since we were 28. We met in a hardware store. I was buying wood stain. She was buying wood stain. And we got into an argument about finishes that lasted 40 minutes and ended with her saying, "You're wrong, but you're wrong in an interesting way, and I'm hungry." We went for noodles. 7 years later, we were still going for noodles every Thursday and still arguing about finishes, and I had never once, not once, allowed myself to think carefully about why Thursday was the only day of the week that felt like it had a point. She was 33. She was a freelance illustrator, children's books, editorial work. The occasional album cover that she pretended not to be proud of. She had a way of looking at things sideways, literally tilting her head when she was studying something, like the world made more sense at 15 degrees. She kept her pens in a leather roll that she carried everywhere, held together by a clasp that had broken twice and been repaired both times with electrical tape. Because she said new things didn't have any personality yet. She was sharper than me by a wide margin, and she was kind about it, which was worse than if she hadn't been, because it meant she saw me clearly and chose to stay anyway. Her mother, Margaret, was 63, a retired pharmacist, widowed 4 years ago, and the most quietly strategic person I have ever encountered. She had the particular gift of asking a question that sounded casual and was, in fact, a precision instrument. The third time I met her, at a birthday dinner for Lily, she had looked at me across the table and said, "Owen, do you always watch her like that? Or only when you think no one's looking?" I had laughed, because I didn't know what else to do. She hadn't laughed back. The Sunday it happened, I had come over to help Margaret move a bookshelf. Lily had mentioned it the Thursday before. Her mum needed the heavy one in the living room shifted to the opposite wall, and Lily was going to do it herself, but I had said I'd come. Because the thought of Lily Chen trying to deadlift a solid oak bookcase made me feel a specific kind of anxiety I didn't want to examine. When I arrived, Margaret opened the door with that expression she sometimes had, the one that suggested she was 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room and was being patient about it. "She's not here," she said. "She got called out to a meeting with an editor. She'll be gone until tonight." "I can come back," I said. "Or," Margaret said, "you can move the bookshelf, and then I can show you something." Something about the way she said it made me go quiet. The bookshelf took 20 minutes. It was solid oak, as predicted. Margaret made tea while I worked, and she watched me with the particular attention of someone who was deciding whether to do something she had been considering for some time. When I was done, she handed me the tea and looked at me and said, "Come upstairs." Margaret, don't make it strange. Come upstairs. I followed her. I had poor survival instincts around Chen women. This was well established. She walked me down the hallway to the last door on the left. Lily's childhood bedroom. I had never been inside it. Lily had grown up in this house and moved out at 24, and in the 7 years I'd known her, I had been to this house dozens of times and never once gone past the landing. Margaret opened the door. She stood aside to let me in. Then she said, "She'll be out for hours. Don't rush." And she closed the door behind me and went downstairs. Lily's childhood bedroom smelled like graphite and old paper, and something faintly floral that I recognized but couldn't place. And then I could. Because it was the same hand cream she still used, which meant she had been here recently. Which meant this room was not an archive. It was a living thing. The bed was made. The shelves were full. Half books, half supplies. The kind of organized chaos that only makes sense to the person who built it. There was a desk under the window with good north-facing light, the kind an artist would choose, and on the desk was the pen roll with the broken clasp. She'd been working here, recently, not visiting. Working, I noticed the drawings the way you notice weather changing, not all at once, but in pieces. A sketch pinned to the corkboard above the desk. Another taped to the edge of the bookshelf. A small one, barely larger than a postcard, tucked into the frame of the mirror on the back of the door. They were all of me. Not photographs. Not copies. Drawings. Pencil. Ink. Some in the watercolor wash she used for her professional work. Me at the hardware store, I could tell by the shelving in the background. Me at the noodle place, laughing at something. My hand around a cup. Me in profile, looking at something out of frame, with the particular expression I apparently make when I'm concentrating, which I had never seen on my own face before, but recognized instantly, because she had drawn it so precisely that it felt like being described by someone who had memorized me. There were more. I counted them and stopped at 14. They weren't hidden. That was the thing. They weren't stuffed in a drawer or kept in a portfolio. They were on the walls, on the corkboard, at the edges of things she looked at every day. They were the room. They were how she had decorated the space where she worked when no one was watching. Something in my chest shifted, not dramatically. Just enough to change the weight of everything. I sat down in the chair at her desk because my legs had made that decision without consulting me. There was a sketchbook open on the desk. I shouldn't have looked at it. I knew that. But Margaret had said, "Don't rush." And the door was closed, and the page was open, and what was on it was a drawing of my hands. Just my hands. Holding a piece of wood, I could tell by the grain she'd drawn. She'd gotten the grain right. Of course, she had. She had drawn my hands with 9½ fingers, and she had made the missing portion look like it belonged there, like it was a feature and not an accident. And under the drawing in her small, slanted handwriting was a single line. He doesn't know what he looks like when he's making something. I closed the sketchbook. I sat there for a while. When I came downstairs, Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table with her own tea, and she looked at me with an expression that contained no surprise and a great deal of patience. "How long?" I said. "Since before you met me," she said. She drew the first one about 2 months after the hardware store. I sat down across from her. My hands were doing a thing where they didn't know where to go. I put them on the table. That didn't help. "She doesn't know I've been in there," I said. "She doesn't know anyone's been in there." Margaret looked at me over her tea. "I went in to water the plant on the windowsill about a year ago, and I saw the first ones, and I've been keeping that to myself ever since, and it has been." She exhaled. "Difficult. Why today?" She set her cup down carefully. Because last Thursday she came home from your noodle dinner and sat on my sofa. She still comes here on Thursdays after. Did you know that? And she sat on my sofa and she said, "Mum, do you think some people are just meant to be in your life without it being anything more than what it is?" And I looked at my daughter, who has been drawing the same man's hands for 5 years, and I thought, I am done watching this. That sentence did something quiet to the room. "She'll never tell you," Margaret said simply. "She has convinced herself that the friendship is the important thing, and she is right. It is the important thing. But she has also convinced herself that what she feels would damage it. And she is wrong about that, and she is too stubborn to find out on her own." She looked at me steadily. "So, now you know." I looked at my hands on the table, 9.5 fingers. She had drawn every one of them from memory. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," Margaret said. "I'm just going to ask you one question, and then I'm going to wash these cups, and you're going to leave, and whatever happens next is between you and her. Okay?" "Owen." She said my name the way she always did, like it was a word she had decided a long time ago to keep. "Do you know why Thursday is the only day of the week that feels like it has a point?" I looked at her. "Yes," I said, very quietly. She nodded once, picked up the cups, turned to the sink. That was the end of the conversation. Margaret Chen was a woman who knew when to stop. I didn't see Lily until Thursday. 4 days. I spent them the way I spend everything, slowly, deliberately, in my workshop, stripping old varnish and sanding surfaces down to the grain underneath. I am not going to pretend the metaphor was lost on me. I am a simple man, not an oblivious one. Thursday evening. The noodle place. Our table by the window. She was already there when I arrived, her pen roll on the table beside her. Her head tilted at the menu she had memorized 3 years ago, and when she looked up and smiled, I understood something I had been refusing to understand for 7 years. Which is that there are things you can know without admitting you know them, and the not admitting takes more effort than the knowing ever did. "You look weird," she said. "Did you do something to your hair?" "I moved your mum's bookshelf on Sunday," I said. "I know," she told me. "She said you were very helpful and that you have good posture." She looked at me. "She's fixated on posture lately. I think it's an age thing. She showed me your room." Lily went still. Not dramatically, just still. The pen roll was under her right hand. Her fingers tightened once around it. "What?" she said. "Your room. Upstairs, the one with the north-facing light." She looked at me. She was doing the thing she did when she was calculating how much weight a moment could hold. Her mother's daughter always. I could see her running the numbers. What I'd seen. How much I knew. What it changed. She had no right to do that, she said quietly. "She had every right," I said. "She's your mum and she loves you, and she has been watching you draw a man's hands for 5 years and not say anything about it, and I think she just ran out of room for keeping it." Lily looked away, looked at the menu, looked at the window, looked at anything that wasn't me. "It's just sketching," she said. "Artists draw what's in front of them. You're in front of me a lot. It doesn't have to mean you drew the missing half," I said. She stopped. "You drew my hands and you included the part that isn't there, and you made it look like it was supposed to be that way." She closed her eyes. "You don't have to say anything," I said. "Not tonight. Not ever. If you don't want to. We can eat noodles and argue about wood stain, and I will never mention your bedroom or your sketchbook or the fact that you apparently come home on Thursdays and sit on your mum's sofa and ask philosophical questions about us. We can do that. I am willing to do that." She opened her eyes. She looked at me. "But I want you to know," I said, "that the reason Thursday is the only day that matters is not because of the noodles." She held my gaze. Her fingers were still tight on the pen roll. "I know that," she said, very softly. "I've known that for a while." "How long?" "Since the hardware store." She almost smiled. "You were wrong about the finish, by the way. You're still wrong." "I know," I said. "And you're wrong that I was going to keep it quiet forever," she said. Her voice had dropped, and she was looking at me with her head tilted at that angle. 15 degrees, the one she used when the world finally made sense. I needed to get it right first. The drawing, I couldn't get your hands right. The proportions kept, she stopped. Laughed once, and it came out shaky. "That's not a metaphor." "It's a little bit a metaphor," I said. "Shut up." She was smiling. She was also very slightly crying in the way she did, quickly, like it had snuck past security. "I've been drawing you for 5 years because you're the only person I have ever met who makes me want to get the details exactly right. Every single one. That's not what artists do with subjects. That's what artists do with..." She stopped. "With what?" I said. She looked at me. Set the pen roll down on the table, very carefully. "With the thing they can't stop looking at," she said. I reached across the table. I didn't touch her hand. I set mine next to hers, close enough that she could decide. She looked at our hands side by side, hers with graphite under the fingernails, mine with 9.5 fingers and sawdust in the creases, and she closed the distance herself. Her hand was warm. From across the restaurant, someone dropped a plate and the whole room startled, and Lily laughed, a real one this time, and said, "Excellent ambience," and I said, "Very romantic." And we were, for a moment, exactly who we had always been. Except everything had changed. 3 months later, she gave me the sketchbook, not to look at, to keep. She put it on my workbench next to a half-finished chair and said, "I want it to live where you work," and didn't explain further, and I didn't ask her to. The drawing of my hands was still on the open page. She had finished it. The proportions were right. A year after that, we moved in together, and the pen roll with the broken clasp lived on the kitchen table, and the leather roll sat next to whatever I was working on in the evenings, and she drew and I sanded, and we existed in the particular silence of two people who had finally stopped pretending that proximity was the same thing as accident. Margaret, when she visited, sat at our kitchen table and drank tea and looked at the two of us with the expression of a woman who had once opened a bedroom door and closed it behind someone and waited, patiently, for gravity to do what gravity does. She never said, "I told you so." She didn't need to. Years later, when people asked how we got together, Lily said, "His mum's version is better. Ask her." Margaret said, "I moved a bookshelf." I said I went to a hardware store and got into an argument about finishes and spent the next 7 years losing it. That wasn't the comforting version. It was accurate. What would you have done if your best friend's mother closed the door and left you standing in a room full of drawings you were never supposed to see? And have you ever been someone's secret? Not because they were ashamed, but because they loved you too carefully to risk saying it out loud? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.